Hey, everybody. Welcome to Next Level Healing. I'm your host, Dr. Tara Perry, and I'm so excited to have our guest here today, Kristi Nelson. She has been the ambassador for Grateful Living and the author of Wake Up Grateful, the transformative practice of taking nothing for granted. She served as executive director at the Grateful Living Center from 2014 to 22. If you go to grateful.org, you can find their organization, very cool website there. Her life's work is now devoted to nonprofit sector. She's focused on leading, inspiring, strengthening organizations. She holds a master's degree from Harvard. And Kristi, welcome to the show. I mean, you and I were just already getting on fire, just talking about consciousness.
I'm here. I'm so excited to be with you. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I read your book and I'm so grateful. I'm a listener, so you read it yourself on audio. And for me, I don't know what it is. I know science is someday going to figure out what gets transmitted in voice, but because it's your voice and your story and your experience, it's so powerful. Would you tell our listeners what inspired you to write this book and this heroic story that you went through? Which you're still living.
And we do every day, each of us, I think, really. So the inspiration to write the book was to kind of translate this work that I've been doing for a long time into everyday practices and everyday accessible ways of thinking about how to really savor life, how to see life as the gift that it is, how to live fully into the moments that we have. And that really comes for me from a story which is now 30 years, which is just unbelievable. I'm about to have my 30-year anniversary. I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in 1993. And that was after a really long time of being sick. I was sick for 9 months before I was diagnosed, and it just kept getting worse and worse. I was more and more disabled. And then they finally figured out what was wrong with me. And I think that's really an important part of the story, because people think that cancer especially has a particular trajectory where kind of, you can get early interventions and stuff, but they could not. This was elusive, evasive. It was mysterious. And like people like to think there's a rare cancer. And I think all cancers are actually rare, because that's what defines cancer, is being aberrant, cells that aren't behaving the way that they're supposed to. And so that is the definition of cancer. And so all cancers are themselves anomalous. And so I had this bizarre journey. By the time they diagnosed me stage 4, it was in my spine, started, I guess, in my chest and metastasized very aggressively. And so I had about 18 months of healing work to do there, and traditional and non-traditional healing modalities and surgeries, lots of surgeries, and came out of it with a poor prognosis. So after all that, and then I have continued to live. And so for me, the book was an opportunity to put into words and put on paper and put into my voice, as you say, some of the things that have become incredibly clear to me about life as a result of traveling this journey, where life has not been something I've been able to expect, right? As some people take that so for granted, that life just keeps unfolding.
And you were somebody that really did take good care of themselves. You had a healthy diet. So you were not the prime candidate for something like this.
Not at all.
The way you described what it was like, I mean, my heart, because I ran my own medical practice for 23 years in Southern California in 3 different locations. And I mean, it's so difficult when somebody comes in and they get this diagnosis, and sometimes it's clear and sometimes it's not. But when it's fatal, I mean, it just sucks the life out of you. And your telling of that story, you realize how vulnerable you are. I imagine that at some point you got very clear about surrendering and living in appreciation, because there really isn't any other choice at that point.
Well, what's interesting is there are choices, and you see a lot of people who go through the why me and get really angry, right? So I decided to skip that word. And I really felt like, wow, if this is the truth, that my days are numbered, and now all of a sudden I'm enlightened to that fact, how do I want to spend my days, whether I've got 12 days left, 12 years left, or, 1,200? I mean, who knows? We have no idea. So what do we do in the face of that? I think is a very big question. And my decision, though it wasn't like I just made this decision, it was so clear to me from the inside out that treasuring every moment that I had was how I needed to approach the idea of time, whatever time was afforded me. And so, yeah. So I think there's lots of different ways that we deal with a diagnosis like this. And it was a very heavy duty one because I was in a lot of pain. I was young, youngish at 32, 33.
Very.
And yeah, and it was, I had friends who, as you say, who looked at me and said, if it's possible for Kristi Nelson to get cancer, if you can be someone doing yoga, jogging, being vegetarian, eating all the nutritional supplements that you do, you know, all the stuff that I did, meditating, if you can get cancer, wow, that's a wake-up call for all of us. And so I appreciated the opportunity to be a teacher for people in that experience of, I guess for me, it was humbling and it was sobering. And it was a wake-up call that we can be in charge of a lot of things in life, but we're not in charge of everything. And so how we go through the journeys that we get given in life is really the choice that's ours.
That reminds me of Byron Katie, who I love so much, loving what is.
Yep. Yeah.
So, do you think that you're coming to just marinating in gratitude, which is such an amazing energy, did that save your life?
Oh, such a good question. And, you know, I will not say that it saved my life. I think a lot of things saved my life altogether. And I try to resist, personally, I try to resist when people say, what was your formula? So that I can follow it exactly. And I say, the formula, if there is one, is figuring out what the formula is for you. You know, so I do think that we have such individual journeys and such individual constitutions, bodies, like we're so individual, bio-individual, spiritually individual, karmically individual. What is ours to navigate? So I tried to make the best decisions that I could in every single moment. And certainly one of the things, to be honest, that was, I got sick at a time when Bernie Siegel and Louise Hay were very, very popular. And I experienced that as a ton of pressure, to be perfectly honest. I felt like, wow, I'm only going to die if I don't want to live. Like, this is really scary. And because I feel like I'm on this pathway where I might die, but I'm in love with life. And so I felt like what was important for me to be really, I'm just going to be so forthright because I have no, you know, you're here to interview me. So what I would say is I felt like I wanted to be able to feel scared and sad and to deeply embrace the feeling states that would arise for me and not feel like they were going to kill me. So I didn't put a pressure on myself to be grateful all the time or to be joyful all the time or to have a good attitude all the time. I let myself cry. I let myself be scared and bereft and to feel, because that was part of why I loved life. It was why my expression of how much I loved life was that I was sad at 32 to imagine losing it. And yeah, and yet I also learned to pray for the first time for myself. Really, I said the first prayer I ever prayed when I was in the hospital, and I didn't seem to be getting better, and they weren't able to figure out what was wrong with me. And I really made kind of an agreement with God. And I said, you know, if I'm meant to die an early death here, may it be as profound and powerful as a long life would have been. May I teach as much in my dying young as I would have been able to impart in my life if it was long. And if I get to have a long life, may it be as powerful and profound and instructive as dying young could be. So wherever I go on this journey, I'm willing to die young, but let it be a teaching.
Beautiful.
That was my first prayer. So it was, you know what I mean? So it was like, attitude was important, But I also realized there were so many things that were important in there too, and that cutting myself off from my deepest emotions was not going to be the answer for me. It was going to be embracing those, loving those, and therefore not holding them at bay and having them have more power over me than I wanted them to have.
Wonderful. So if you were to go back in time and talk to Kristi Nelson a month before she got that initial diagnosis, which I don't even know if you got a diagnosis right away. You went into the hospital and it was a long time.
It was a long journey.
Months of not getting answers and knowing that something was wrong. And I mean, just the way you described the journey, it's just like it.
Yeah.
But what would you say to that Kristi Nelson one where that occurred?
What a great question. So let me take a minute and just, not a minute, but let me just tune in. I would say you're on the right track, and living is not conditional. Living fully and being alive fully is not conditional on length of time. It's conditional on the quality of your presence to the life that you have. And trust that you're on the right path, and just hold steady, hold fast to life, and let it go at the same time.
So beautiful, so wise. A lot of the wisdom teachers say to let death be your teacher. I'm sure you've run across that.
Oh, big time.
Seen it firsthand. You've lived it.
I believe in that, actually. I believe it's Saint Benedict said, keep death always before your eyes. And that and the Stoics and all the people who really believe that allowing ourselves to accept and embrace our mortality is the key to a more fully lived life. And I would say that that's true for me. That's true, is that I don't take my life for granted. I don't take a single day for granted, which means I embrace the possibility that it could also not be there. It could evaporate. It could not be. So then that brings me really fully alive, because I don't take a single moment that I have for granted. And I think when we take life and time for granted, we put off. We say, I'll be grateful when, if this is right, all my circumstances or whatever, I will be thankful for life. I'll be successful when, I'll be joyful, I'll feel love when, I'll give love when, I'll be generous when. And we put all those things off. And the truth is, there is no when that's promised to us. That when is a big mystery. And so why not live it now? Live it today as if it's all you have.
So true. So true. What would you say the three biggest allies that you had were going through this whole process that you went through?
My family was amazing. So allies, do you mean in terms of like, the beings? So I felt very much surrounded by love. And that was, if you want to say what helped cure me, I would say that the amount of love, but also the fact that I was cognizant of the love that surrounded me. And I chose to believe that all the people in my healing life were my beloveds as well, so that everybody was sent to me. Even the people who were residents in the hospital who didn't know how to draw my blood well and, oh my God, left me bruised head to toe. It's like all those people, it's like, okay, you were sent to me for a reason. Let's figure out why. Let's open the door to love and curiosity and see what's here. And so I think the medical people, the healers, my friends, my family, and then I would say also too, that sense that I developed over time, being alone so much, of a higher power, of a sense of grace, a sense of being held in a much bigger embrace than was tangible. Those were all alliances that I leaned into very heavily, the tangible and the intangible.
Beautiful. Beautiful. When you were talking about that story of connecting to a higher power, it was just reminding me of an incident I had when I was just feeling the overwhelming electricity and buildup of human stuff and the intrusion of our existence on the planet. And literally at 4 o'clock in the morning, one time I went down to the beach in Long Beach, and the port of Long Beach is right there. And I was just overwhelmed by the lights and the ships and I was almost like, I don't remember if I was physically crying or not, but I just tuned into Mother Earth and I just said, I am so sorry what we've done to you. And, if we need to go because we're ruining the party here, I'm okay with that. And it was so crazy because I really wasn't expecting a huge response, but I got one.
Wow.
Mother Earth just said, I love you. I want to support you. It was just this immense mother love that came from Earth. I'm relating to your story of that moment of surrender and just feeling the divine, consciousness, whatever you want to call it, the quantum field, God, just connecting back. And there's just seems to be an awful lot of power in that.
And I would say that we're called right now, the planet, there's illness all around us and our planet, right? So this Mother Earth energy that you talk about and how protective I feel towards what's happening on the planet. And I would say the other thing that I didn't mention that is interesting that you just segued right off it is the natural world was a huge ally for me. I got myself out into nature all the time. Like that was, once I left the hospital and all of my treatment, I just never wanted to be indoors. Literally, it was like, pull me in. I was barefoot in the winter. I was outside all the time. I just wanted to be under the stars and under trees and on the earth. And, and I think, how do we reckon with the kind of illness that the planet is facing now? Like truly, and that, there's a lot of questions there. But one of my friends said the other day, we're so worried about the planet and the planet's worried about us, because planet's going to be better off than we are in the end. So just, I think there's a lot of questions there about how we go through, how do we build those alliances and the alliance with the natural world, which is our mother, how we build that alliance in a deep, respectful way that allows sustenance for ourselves and for the planet, that we're in partnership. So moving forward, we can't do this without each other, all of us.
And living with the illusion that we somehow created what has been gifted to us.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever experienced a full eclipse of the sun.
Yeah.
It's if anybody has an opportunity to go experience that, I went right into the pathway of a full solar eclipse, and it'll take your breath away. It's like, wow, without that energy, we're gone in a heartbeat.
Yeah, I mean, awe to remain in reverent awe for what our planet and what the universe is making happen and bringing us in every single moment. That's one of the ways that I live. It's just, it's awesome. It's truly awe-inspiring, and so much bigger than we are. And so living with that kind of reverence is medicinal for me.
So I have a 23-year background in acupuncture, nutritional medicine, and actually I did, I'll just pop this in here, but I had a stage 4 throat cancer patient that came to me, and he asked me the magic words, which are, well, because I can't treat cancer, I can help somebody get healthy, and if the cancer goes away, that's great. Yeah. So he asked me, what would you do if you were me? And I didn't know, I hadn't been in practice very much, and I know there's a lot of healing tools out there today, and I'm really anxious to hear what you turn to. I said, well, the people I've seen survive cancer the best are the ones that do organic vegetable juicing for a series of weeks. And I did muscle testing on him, and I said, the anger and resentment that you're holding on to, let it go yesterday. And he did exactly what I said, which isn't always the case. And he was cancer-free in 5 weeks. Craziness. Supposed to do 14 rounds of chemo. After 4, he didn't think he was going to survive. And they yelled at him. They screamed at him. And you talked about, making your own decisions that are right for you, which I think is an important part of this process. But they screamed at him that if he didn't do his 14 rounds of chemo, he'd be dead in a month. and he was cancer-free in 5 weeks. And glad they made a television show about it because it got all documented. The doctors didn't even ask him what he did to survive. Crazy. They did consent to be in the television show, and then just like, well, yeah, we don't know what happened to him.
Right.
But and he's still alive. I mean, this is like 15 years ago, which is wonderful because survival rates. You're an amazing miracle. You've gone a long time recovering from stage 4. So I'd like to, and I know people ask you what's the magic formula all the time, but did you turn to holistic modalities and was were there meditation, mental states?
Yeah.
I think gratitude and forgiveness are 2 keys to massive health and living principles. So what? Well, if you were talking to somebody that was currently undergoing something, what would you say were really powerful tools that helped you?
It's such a good question. And again, I think one of the most beautiful things is to help people as much as we can as practitioners, as teachers, as people in roles to be looked to for wisdom, is to help people connect with what their gut really says. So, making sure that your gut is available to you, that your sixth sense, that your intuition, that your instincts are really alive and empowered, right? So that for me, that is the most important thing. And what I tell people all the time is what feels right. What really, when you go deep, what registers for you on that scale. And so for me, I opted to so I did the conventional treatments of chemotherapy, and it was very aggressive, and it was for 6 months, every other week, every 14 days. So I did that. And I also did radiation treatments to my spine where the bone, because it was intractable in the bone, and they were able to see that the cancer and a lot of the rest of my body was really gone from the chemo, but the chemo had not been able to get to the bone to the same level. So they did radiation treatments there. So, wow, that's an amazing thing. And I'm still around to talk about it. Those are not easy treatments to go through, but I benefited a lot from these other developments that had just come in, which were, drugs that helped me, and I was a kind of person who I didn't even take aspirin practically before. And I always said, if I ever get diagnosed with cancer, I am going to go macrobiotic. I'm going to do that, and I'm never going to get, and I made different choices. So that's right. What's interesting in the end is like, for me, boom, there, and I'm still here 30 years later to talk about it. So I think, who knows what would have been true if I had made other choices, but this is what's true for me. There were a lot of blessings of the medicines that I had, the conventional allopathic Western medicine that I was involved. At the same time, I had a consultation with Yeshe Donden, who was the Dalai Lama's doctor. So I did Tibetan medicine, and I also did Chinese medicine, and I did acupuncture every single week, sometimes twice a week through the entire course of my chemo and radiation. And maybe you don't even know this, so it's like so cool that I can talk about that. And I did Chinese herbs, and I did these just horrible tasting teas and like just the concoctions that were on my stove. And I also did Essiac tea, which was an herbal tea, which I got at the time from Canada, from somebody in Canada, which was a tea that was supposed to be anti-carcinogenic. And I had Reiki energy healing, people who would come to my house because I couldn't walk. So I was being ushered around and shuttled around and visited by people, which was really amazing to have practitioners who would come to my home when I was too sick to get out. So, and I did a lot of nutritional supplements that were, helping deal with the free radicals. So, doing the anti-inflammatory stuff at the time, and a lot of vitamins and minerals that I knew were going to be really helpful. So I was busy, it was like because I was doing a full roster, I would say for the most part over here of complementary, what we now call more complementary. At the time was more alternative medicine, and then the more conventional or Western medicine, allopathic. So it was a whole roster, and I did basically everything that made sense to me. But one thing that I will say that I think is important that came to me when you were asking me the question that I've never talked really much about is there was this idea at the time that chemotherapy, it was so intense and aggressive. It was awful. I mean, it just like was a pretty brutal thing, right? Um, and there were a lot of people who talked about it, like envision it as Pac-Man, or envision it as like a GI Joe, or like a warrior, or envision it something that is, martial arts, or so this idea that the chemotherapy was this aggressive thing. And so for me, I worked with a healer at the time who said, come up with an image for the chemotherapy that will be something that your body can work with. And out of nowhere, like, just who could imagine? I was like, what can survive on, like, basically devouring something as awful as cancer? Like, what? Like, rather than fighting it, what can the ally relationship be? So I pictured catfish. And so the chemotherapy was catfish going through my veins and basically eating all the sludge, like, off the side of it. And so I had an aquarium full of catfish that my friends and family, that I would have catfish right in my living room. And I pictured this. So for me, the choice was that what I was choosing, I chose to regard benevolently. I chose to see it as an ally rather than doing something that was against my instincts and resisting it, or fighting it, or questioning it, or doubting it. I tried to be in a cooperative relationship with my choices. And I believe that that's really of great benefit.
I think that's perfect. It reminds me of, I do a lot of Joe Dispenza work, and he has you go into the quantum, nothing, nowhere, no time, and connect to whatever it is that energy is that you want or need at that time. And
Yeah.
According to quantum theory, everything is available all the time, and we really just have to get out of our own way.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really interesting that your intuition, your instincts guided you there, and that worked so well.
And I didn't even know Joe Dispenza at the time. He wasn't ever, right? This is 30 years ago.
Well, truth is truth is truth. And I think different people have been teaching it in different languages throughout time. And that's kind of what our experience and journey is, and sharing our information, and learning from each other, and kind of being that mirror for each other. Because that's what the wisdom teachers all say too, that we're all of one another.
And to be of service, to serve the bigger picture and each other in the ways that we can. So I'm grateful to have had an experience that can be of benefit to other people, and to just see my place and being willing to share that in the ways that are meaningful for people, I hope.
Yeah. So you, for a bunch of years, I'm looking 8, were part of, you headed up Grateful. What was that experience like? How did you get invited to do that? At what point did you realize it was time to move on, and what are you focused on now?
Thank you. Well, great question. Gratefulness has just always been how I've lived ever since I got through this experience. I think I've just made the decision to live every moment as gratefully as I can. And then I heard about Brother David Steindl-Rast, and Brother David is a Benedictine monk. And so St. Benedict is the one who said, keep death always before your eyes. And Brother David really had the experience in the Second World War of almost dying a lot of times because of the bombs dropping and everything in Austria. And then when he would come out of the church basements, or the basements where the kids were hiding, and see the blue sky, it was like as if there had never been a bluer sky, and as if the joy in his heart had never been greater. And so that relationship between embracing the possibility of death and being really fully alive is part of what he's taught, gratefulness. And he wrote a book called Gratefulness, the Heart of Prayer, and he's just been a prolific writer. So he's now 97. He's back in Austria. He's an extraordinary, amazing teacher, and a huge inspiration and role model in my life. So he founded this organization called the Network for Grateful Living. And they were looking for a director about 10 years ago, and I applied. And it felt like a calling to me. And so I was glad that they saw that the organization felt like it was a calling for them to have me as well. And we were in beautiful partnership for 9 years. I just left in March of this year. So not long ago, 2023. And after a good 9-year run, and I'm 63, so I feel like it's time for me to embrace a different kind of pace in my life a little bit. Running an organization, if you've ever been, especially an executive director of a nonprofit organization that relies on contributions and fundraising and those kinds of things, it's a lot of work, and it's wonderful. And I worked with a team I loved, and I knew I had to move on and move into something that was going to be more sustainable for me. So I'm now doing work more independently. I'm doing workshops. I'm still teaching from the book. The book is being republished this year in the fall, which I'm very excited about, in paperback. And so I will be continuing to do workshops and keynotes and presentations and teaching and podcasts and just the places wherever I'm called and invited to show up. And I'm also going to be writing another book, I hope, next year. So that will be exciting.
I'm so excited for you. That's wonderful. And what a great message. What was the process like deciding or downloading, however it came about, that you wanted to write a book? And then as a first-time author, what was that process and experience like?
It's a beautiful line of inquiry because it's so many people want to write books, right? So that I talk to people all the time, and I had maybe wanted to write a book, but I never thought that I could. And what was helpful was doing it under the auspices of the organization, and then and my board of directors, the people who were running the organization, really wanted this book to go out in the world because it was a translation and a transmission of Brother David's teachings in more kind of lay people's language. He's Benedictine, so he comes from more of a liturgical background, and I could come from a more agnostic or multi-faith or spiritual kind of place, and less religion. So I felt compelled, and like I said, I say in the back of the book, if I hadn't felt like this was a burning mandate from the universe to write this book, I never would have finished it, because left to my own devices, there would be no book. And so it took that amount of feeling directed, and by both the board that I loved, the organization that I loved, Brother David, who I loved. It was like, how can I serve this work? I'm going to write this book. And then once you put that book proposal together and get somebody who wants to publish it, then the timeline is tight and the accountability is high. So, we got a small advance, the organization, and then it's just, there's kind of no real stepping off the escalator. You're kind of on it, and you're on this moving pathway, like through the airport, and it's really hard to get off. So the railings are there, and you're in motion, and there's people checking all the time, and you've got accountabilities. So that really helped me recognize the discipline that it took, to be honest. And now, my hope is to be able to bring that discipline myself, without the organization necessarily. But I feel like there's something I'm percolating right now that I feel like really needs to be written, and I'm excited about that. So, and it comes out of this commitment that I have, and it feels like it would be another little piece of legacy work for me in terms of trying to express something that I think is really important.
Beautiful. Fantastic. And as a first-time author, what do you feel like was the key? Because you're right, everybody wants to write a book, to actually attracting and gaining a publisher.
Absolute crystal clarity and passion about what it is that you want to write about. You can't be equivocating. It has to be super unequivocal. So it's like you are there 100% and with a vision. And that's hard. It's really super hard to come by, I think. A vision that is pretty crystal clear and a commitment that is unequivocal. That combination is what's necessary to not just get a publisher, but actually to get the book written. And then to keep going through all the things that actually having a published book requires. And for some people, like I love Elizabeth Gilbert, who I just love so much, and she writes a book about, big magic and the muse and this creative energy that like sits on your shoulder and just like tune into it and befriend it. And it's your biggest ally. And I was like, it's not so easy. And so when it's really hard, same thing with dealing with cancer. When it's really hard, it's like to embrace that and say, this is part of the journey. This is not to be pushed away and I've got to feel just blissed out every single moment I'm writing this book or else it's not meant to be. No, part of it is to sort through the layers of the onion and get off the layers of the skin and like work through all of what's so challenging and survive that. Sometimes that's really what it is. And sometimes the downloads of what I needed to write would come at 2:30 in the morning and I would need to just listen and get up and write all night long. And, it wasn't always pretty. I made sure I was living far away from a lot of people. I did retreats, writing retreats. So I would go away to friends who weren't going to be there and like take care of their houses and have big spaces of time and no one around. That for me is a really critical component of success for me as a writer, is to not have to tend to anybody else in the process.
I read a book recently, and forgive me, I don't remember which one it was, but they inquired to a successful writer, well, do you wait for the spirit to move you to sit down and write? And he says, yes. And fortunately, it hits every morning at 9 a.m.
Oh, that's great.
Well, no, he was tongue in cheek.
Yeah.
I sit down.
Right.
Yeah.
I discipline myself.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Create the space for that. Yeah.
I think that's exactly the right kind of relationship to these things, is to say, do you make yourself available? Are you available, 100% available for what it is that's supposed to move through you? And if you can figure out how to make yourself really available to that, which is, for me means the willingness to sit with silence and the willingness to sit with an empty page for as long as is necessary. And it can be uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
And the willingness to do that is generative. It allows for things to come that you didn't ever expect. But it can take sometimes a degree of willingness to be with a kind of suffering, like suffering through the not knowing and the whatever it is that has to be faced in ourselves. We don't get to escape it.
Surrender. Beautiful.
Surrender. Yeah.
You mentioned something really important in your book, and I love the way you described it, because you got through the trials and the tribulations, and then there was that moment of, I can breathe, I can live, I don't have to have a doctor's appointment, da 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 da.
Yeah.
And you actually shared with us, that feeling of starting to take things for granted again. So this is really, it's something that is an active process. It's not something we can get lazy about, because especially, here in the West, Pema Chodron kind of laughs at us. Do you know who she is? She's a
Yes, of course.
Love her. And how can you not love Pema Chodron? But she and she's the humor with which she writes, and is just so
compassion.
In fact, I had a radio show out of Angel Stadium, and I was right before the Angel game on Sundays, and I could get almost anybody for an interview because of my time slot. I couldn't get Pema Chodron. She's like off doing her interviews, she didn't care about publicity. She didn't care about that.
Yeah.
She was doing her seminars, and I think the only interview she had done was like with Bill Myers on CBS years earlier.
Yeah.
Anyway, it was just funny talking.
She's extraordinary.
It was funny talking to her agent, because she's like, yeah, well, I'll ask her, but probably not.
Good luck. Good luck, right?
Speak a minute to how, and again, Pema Chodron, she says, if you live in the West, it's really hard to think you're put upon, because so much of the world is so much more, has so much less than we do. So speak to what it takes to be vigilant about appreciating.
Well, I call it a moment-to-moment practice. It's not just sitting on a cushion for 20 minutes or, and saying, this is what I intend. It's how you live every single moment. And I think it's the willingness to be turned inside out for life, which is to say, to take nothing for granted is to be acutely aware of every privilege and every blessing. And that's a lot. It's to be willing to be overwhelmed by those things, to see the miracle in so much that is available to us, the incredible privileges, and to claim those privileges, to see those, to recognize that we didn't used to have a lot of what we have. We won't someday have what we have. A lot of people don't have what we have. A lot of people would give anything to have what we have. And so how do we honor what we have except for living in this really profound appreciation for it? And taking things for granted is such an intense dishonoring. The people in our lives, the things that we have in our lives, the bodies that we have. And we could just, if we just made a practice, which is part of what I really think the point is, out of noticing everything that is in service of our lives and appreciating those things, truly being aware and awake and alive to those things, open to them. It's the greatest quality of life. It shifts everything immediately on its axis. It's to say, I could not have this. Wow. And one day I won't. And a lot of people don't. And I didn't used to, like everything. And can we live with deeper gratitude for all that is available to us in life? And that is, if you know, Brother David says this beautiful thing, which I think is worth really saying. It's not happiness that makes us grateful. It's gratefulness that makes us happy. And that's one of his most famous sayings. It's amazing, right? So it's like, if you're not grateful for what you have, why is having more going to make you grateful? Why is it going to make you happy? Happiness is not about, oh, I need something else in order to be happy. It's about taking stock, taking inventory, and really deeply being appreciative of what is available to us. And then from there, it can grow. But it's not happiness that makes us grateful. It's gratefulness that makes us happy. So if we can start by being grateful, wake up every single day, and the first thing that you do in the morning is be grateful that you're waking up, because
And it's like
not everybody does. Yeah, exactly.
Like there is no way to happiness. Happiness is the way.
Exactly. And we forget when the non-toothache, like we notice what doesn't work, that we notice the toothache, but we don't notice all the moments when we don't have a toothache. So how do we bring our attention to the gifts of all of the suffering that we're not having, all of what is working in our lives, all of what, you know, as opposed to just what's broken? Because we notice things as soon as we lose them, and then it's too late. And so that's part of my purpose and passion in life, is to help people wake up, to be grateful for what we have before needing to lose it or almost lose it, in order to actually recognize that you've been taking it for granted and how much of a gift it was. And that includes life itself.
And when we truly step into that, it's palpable how expansive that is. I mean, just having this conversation with you here now, I can just feel my whole beingness expanding. It's really lovely.
Well, thank you so much. It's really a gift. And I'm grateful for your interest in the topic and the work and the book. I'm so glad to be a guest.
Thank you so much for taking the time. I just want to mention one other thing before we close. I was grousing about one thing or another and something going on in my life. And my meditation teacher said to me, Tara, do you ever just wake up grateful for your breath?
Yeah. There you go.
Wow.
And yeah, and that is the surefire way, I think, to perspective, to living differently, is, did we ever learn anything during COVID but that the breath is a miracle, right? And to be able to breathe unassisted, and to wake up in the morning and take a deep breath and say, I'm here, and have that be a source of joy. That ability to do that, just that, if we can find the extraordinary in the ordinary, then we will be grateful and happy.
Wonderful. Is there anything else you'd like to say in closing? I thank you so much for joining us and sharing this beautiful, precious story and message. I do invite people to go get Wake Up Grateful, the transformative practice of taking nothing for granted. It's joyful to listen to. Really, it's great that you're reading it. Anything else you'd like to add?
I would say, just in ending, if we treat every day as a miracle, if we treat the fact that we're here at all as miraculous, how many millions of things had to go right and not go wrong that we are here at all in every single moment, and be in awe and marvel at that, and go out of our doors skipping and hug the people we love deeply, not taking anything for granted, our lives will be so much more beautiful.
You have a statistic in your book. We have 2.5 million new red blood cells coming online every second.
It's unbelievable.
So what are those cells hearing from you? Are they hearing, oh my God, I have to go, to the market. Oh my gosh, I really don't like being around this person. Oh my gosh, I got to take care of that bill. Oh goodness, I have to go to the gym and get that exercise in, which I really hate.
Or get to.
Yes, exactly. Well, that's the other thing I love in your book is, in fact, I have shared that with other people. I did know that mind shift, but you had a nice little ending to it, which I didn't know. And I also, when I heard it in your book, although I had done it, probably 80% in my world, there was still a chunk that I realized, oh, I'm pushing myself. I've got that I have to. And when I took those things, which were the have tos, and shifted them around to, oh, I get to ... because I can.
Yes, because I can.
Energetically just shifted those things for me in a really beautiful way. So
it is incredible. And I'm a caregiver for my dad. I was a caregiver for my mother who passed away. I'm a caregiver for my stepdad. And, we're all taking care of all kinds of people in our lives. And the fact that we get to is incredible. And that shifts the energy completely. If I feel beleaguered by something, by some of the tasks of life and the things that call on my time and my energy, it's a beautiful shift to say, this is a privilege because I can do it. Someday I won't be able to take care of these people I love. And what an amazing opportunity to get to really appreciate the fact that I can.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Kristi, I really appreciate you being here. I appreciate the thoughtfulness, the energy, the insights, and all the blessings of just being able to make this connection.
Thank you for what you do. And I wish you a grateful day. Thank you.
And everybody, if you liked this episode, please click like and subscribe. Go check out Kristi's book, and we'll see you on the next episode.